Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar this Saturday. It's so good to see so many of you here already. My name is Mairead and I have been teaching English for over 20 years now, so hopefully I'll have lots of useful information to share with you all as you start out on your teaching journey. Today's webinar, as you know, is all about teaching grammar. I know this is a topic that puts fear in the heart of new teachers. So hopefully today we will take some of the mystery out of it and give you some good tips to use. I must admit, I am a self-confessed grammar nerd, so I am excited to tell you that there will be a Q&A for the second half of the webinar, and that will be your opportunity to ask me anything about grammar, either teaching it or just for your own knowledge. Okay, so if you're ready, let's begin. So what is grammar? Well, grammar is the way that language is organized. When it comes to grammar, it is infinite. Okay, there is so much grammar out there. So don't expect to ever know everything. Okay, there is not a person alive who knows everything about grammar. I'm convinced of it. So don't put that expectation on yourself. Okay, because it can be a lot of pressure if you feel like you need to know everything. You don't. Grammar is a massive and complex topic. Think of it this way. You only need to stay one step ahead of your students. So you don't need to know a lot of grammar to start teaching. You just need to know the specific grammar that you are going to teach in the next lesson. Luckily, that's where lesson planning comes along. Okay, that is where we do our research and we prepare ourselves just one lesson ahead. And you'll find that as you teach more and more grammar over the weeks and months and years, you will end up knowing a whole lot by the end of your first year. I sometimes think that you learn it by teaching it. Okay, it's the best way. So before we start looking into the specifics of teaching grammar, here is an important term that you need to be familiar with. We call the grammar point we are going to teach the target language. Okay. This can also be shortened to TL. Okay, target language. So, for example, if we are going to teach the future simple tense, then our target language is the future simple. Okay. So you will see this term a lot used in books, in online resources. So target language, or TL, is the grammar point we are going to teach. Some more really important words when teaching grammar: meaning, form, and phonology. Okay. Again, this can be shortened to MFP. Or sometimes you may see MPF. Okay, maybe the order of the letters will be slightly different, but it means the same thing. So let's explore what these terms mean. So meaning, or M in the equation, is the function of the target language. Okay, so why we use it and what it indicates. So if our target language is the future simple, the meaning would be to talk about future events. Okay, that is why we use the future simple. So think of meaning as why. Okay, why do we use it? What's it for? Next, the F, or form, refers to how we make the target language. Okay, how do we physically construct it? Sticking with our future simple example, the form of the future simple would be subject plus will plus infinitive. Okay, so form is where we break out all of our terminology. Okay, all of those terms that we use to describe different parts of grammar. So the subject is I, you, he, she, etc. Will is an auxiliary verb used for the future. And the infinitive. So the infinitive is like the basic form of the verb. For example, go, have, drive, see. Okay, that is the infinitive. So when we're making the future simple, it would sound something like I will go. Okay, subject, will, infinitive. And, we need to give our students these formulas so that they can then construct their own sentences in the target language. And finally, the P for phonology. This is what it sounds like. Okay, like when we say, in this case, the future simple, what does it sound like? I will go. Okay, I will go. What words are we stressing? Usually the infinitive, right? So I will go. I'll go to the party tomorrow. Yeah, we've got to give our students lots of examples of what a sentence sounds like in the target language when said naturally. Something that's really important to remember, if the tense we're teaching has a contraction, which most of them, if not all of them do, we've also got to drill those contractions. Okay, we can't pretend they don't exist, because actually contractions are what proficient speakers tend to use the most. So while we would absolutely teach I will go, we would then have to teach I'll go. Okay, I'll. So I will, I'll. And the same with the negatives, right? I will not go, I won't go. So when it comes to phonology, always remember to practice the contractions too. So when it comes to teaching grammar, we don't want to just give and lecture. Well, we don't want to lecture our students, okay? They are not there for that. We want it to be a more interactive experience. We want to involve our students in everything we do. They are at the heart of it. So in order to involve them in the learning process, we elicit, okay? If you've started the online course, I'm sure you are more than familiar with this term. Okay, just in case you haven't come across it before, let's explain briefly what it means. So eliciting is a key concept in teaching grammar, or indeed anything. The idea is that when we elicit, we try to get the students to tell us before we tell them. Okay, again, it isn't a lecture from you, okay? You're involving them in the process. You're trying to lead them to tell you the answer, instead of you telling them directly. Eliciting is amazing because it helps keep students engaged in the learning process. Okay, so when you're planning your grammar lesson, always think, how am I going to try to elicit this from the students? We'll look at an example of eliciting later. But getting back to English grammar, it is inevitable that you will spend a lot of time teaching tenses. Okay. In English, believe it or not, there are 12 tenses. Okay, it seems like an awful lot. A lot of languages have far fewer tenses than we do. But there we go, 12 tenses. And the likelihood is that you will be teaching them all at one stage or another. Okay. If you're teaching lower level classes, you may be focusing just on the simple tenses. If you're teaching higher level classes, you will be teaching the more complex ones too. So these 12 basic tenses are split into 3. Okay, we have 4 tenses related to the present, 4 tenses related to the past, and 4 tenses related to the future. Now, when it comes to tenses, it can be a bit confusing initially, as things tend to have different names. Okay, so the same concept may have different terms. For example, if you think about the tense, the present continuous, I would call it the present continuous, but some of my colleagues may call it the present progressive. But it's exactly the same thing, okay? It's just different terms. Continuous or progressive, same thing. The same can happen when it comes to naming the tenses. For example, I would refer to the past simple, like I went, I had, I drove. Yeah, I would call this tense the past simple, but my colleague might call it the simple past. So they would change the order of the words. And that's fine, that's also a term. So that can be initially confusing, so don't let it muddle you up, okay? Whether we say past simple or simple past, it's the same thing, same concept. Or present continuous, present progressive, same thing, just slightly different terms. I would say just go with whatever version you like best, okay? There's no right or wrong, just personal preference. Okay, so let's look at how to approach teaching tenses. Well, first of all, don't panic. It's not as scary as it may seem by any means. The most important thing you can do first and foremost is to research, okay? Take out your grammar books or get Googling good grammar reference sites, okay? Do not even try to attempt to start planning your lesson until you know your target language inside out. So if, for example, I know that next week I am going to be teaching a lesson on the present perfect tense, okay, you had better believe that I'm going to spend most of my weekend researching the present perfect. Okay, I am going to find out the meaning, why it's used. I'm going to figure out the form, okay, how it's made, and I'm going to consider aspects of phonology, like what it sounds like when it's said out loud. Now, a word of hopefully reassurance on this. When you start looking up tenses, you will find that some of them have lots of different meanings. Okay, we can use them in tons of different functions. But when you're teaching, you're typically only teaching one function of the tense. Okay, because if you go into class and tell your students that, for example, the present simple can be used for 8 different reasons, that's only going to scare them and it's going to confuse them, and probably you too. So make sure you know the function that you're teaching or the meaning that you're teaching, and you only need to teach that meaning. Okay. So if you were teaching the present simple for daily routines, that's the only thing you need to teach them about. Okay, you don't need to teach them all the reasons that we use present simple, because there are lots of them. So hopefully that is reassuring for you, that you will generally only ever be teaching one function or one meaning of the target language, of the tense you are teaching. So do your research, have it all straight in your head, the meaning, form, and phonology, before you start planning your lesson. When you're confident that you understand it pretty thoroughly in regards to MFP, then you can start planning your lesson. Okay, establish a context, first of all. I'm sure if you've started the online course, you've read a lot about warmers and the importance of establishing context. Well, this applies to teaching grammar, perhaps more so than anything. So if, for example, your target language is the future simple, like I will go, I will have, what context would lend itself well to talking about the future? Okay, you've got to ask yourself, when would I actually use the future simple in real life? Okay, think of a context that you would use the target language to speak about, because that means that it will be a suitable context. It'll be a relevant context for your students. So if I were teaching the future simple, I might think, I would use the future simple to talk about my plans for next weekend. Okay. I think we could all agree that we would use the present simple. Like, maybe I'll go for a walk. Yeah. It's possible that I'll see my friends. We'll talk about our lives. Yeah. We'll catch up on the news. We'll go for something to eat, maybe. Okay. So weekend plans, future weekend plans would be a great context for this. So you will then use this context of future weekend plans to try to elicit an example of the target language. Okay. So in the warmer, I might say to my students something like, so let's think about next weekend. Okay. Next weekend, next Saturday and next Sunday. What are some possible activities for the weekend? Okay. And, get your students to tell you things like go for a walk, go to the park, okay, see friends. Establish your context first, and then use that context to try to get them to tell you a future simple sentence. So I might say, oh, go to the park. Good. How can we say this in a sentence then? Next weekend, I to the park. What tense might we use? So next weekend, I to the park. Okay. Hopefully they will tell you, I will go. Okay. That is the ideal outcome. So you see what I mean? You're giving them a context, then you're using that context to try to get them to tell you the target language. Usually there'll be at least one or two students who will be able to put it all together. But don't worry if nobody knows. I mean, they are there to learn, right? If they don't know, like if nobody can tell you the sentences, I will go, well, then you tell them and we all move on. Okay. But the idea with eliciting is that you give them the chance to tell you before you tell them. Once you've elicited the target language in a sentence, okay, remember you've then got to keep eliciting, okay, elicit the meaning. So when do we use the future simple? Yeah, and hopefully they will tell you, for things happening next week or tomorrow or next year. Okay, you will then elicit the form. So imagine you have your sentence, I will go to the park. You will ask them, so how do we make the future simple? What is I? Okay, it's the subject. Okay, what comes next? Will. Okay, what is go? What do we call this? Infinitive. So you see, we want them to tell us as much as possible. Okay, if they don't know, of course we tell them, but we give them a chance first. Okay, and then for phonology, we will do lots of practice, lots of listen, repeat. Okay, and as I said before, remember also to pay attention to those contractions. Okay, just also a word on phonology. We want to try and build up to full sentences. Okay, we don't want to just keep I will go or I will have, because we wouldn't say that in real life, right? So by all means, focus on the I will go, I'll go, I won't go, but then try to get the students to repeat full sentences just so they can hear the full thing in action. Like, I'll go to the park tomorrow, or I won't see my friends next weekend. Okay, because on the whole, we tend to speak in full sentences, right? Generally. So focus on the pronunciation of the target language, but then let them hear it and say it in full sentences. This will help them sound more natural. Okay, so once we've set our context and elicited our sentence and elicited the meaning, form, and phonology, the next thing we've got to do is ask CCQs. Okay, so CCQ stands for concept checking questions. The reason for CCQs is to check students' understanding. Asking students questions like, do you understand? Yeah, that is not a good CCQ, because students will always say, oh, yes, 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 I understand. Okay, nobody wants to admit that they haven't understood something, right? Especially when everybody else seems to be nodding along and understanding. So forget about do you understand as a CCQ. Okay, it is not a good CCQ. Effective CCQs for grammar and for tenses especially will tend to focus on things like the time reference. Okay, so we could say, so I'll go to the park next weekend. Is this talking about the past, the present, or the future? Okay. We all tend to do the universal hand signals, right? Like past, present, or future. So that's always a good one. That's always a good CCQ to ask. And we've also got to CCQ the state of the action. So we might say, like, if we're teaching a past tense or a present tense, okay, we might ask them things like, okay, is the action complete? Yeah, is the action finished? Yeah, or is the action in progress? Okay, that one isn't applicable to every tense. Okay, but if it is, it's a really good one to ask. Okay, for example, if I'm teaching the present continuous and I say something like, I am giving a speech on grammar. Okay, so I am giving a speech on grammar. I might ask my students, so is this action finished? And hopefully they will say no. Yeah, because I am giving it, right? It's not finished. It's actually in progress. So it would be super relevant to ask her, is the action finished? No. Is the action in progress? Yes. Okay. When is it happening? Is it about the past, the present, or the future? The present. So with those two CCQs, I've established that the present continuous is for a present action in progress, which is all they need to know about that. Another really good way to support teaching tenses is to use a timeline. So a timeline is just literally like a horizontal bar on which you mark past, present, and future. Okay, and you use that graphic of past, present, and future as a continuous line to indicate when in time the tense is referring to. All right. For example, if you are teaching the first conditional, which you will be if you're doing level 5 assignment B, you'll see that the first conditional has two different actions. Okay, like here's an example. If I see my friends next weekend, I'll say hello. Okay, if I see my friends, I'll say hello. You can see we have two actions there. If I see my friend, and I will say hello. But actually, both of those actions are happening in the future, right? If I see my friends will happen in the future, and I'll say hello will happen even further along in the future. So this is an example of a really nice timeline. We can see the horizontal bar, and then after present, we have our first, if the weather is good. And further along after that, I'll go to the beach. Yeah, both actions happening in the future, one after the other. So most tenses lend themselves really well to being depicted on a timeline. Okay, so do use them. They can offer a lot of clarity to your students. And another tip I have for you regarding teaching tenses, don't rush. Okay, a lot of teachers, especially new teachers, have the attitude of, oh, okay, let's get this explanation over as soon as possible and let's get to the good stuff. Let's get to the practice. Okay, but really, the explanation Explanation is key, okay? Without the proper explanation, students will not be able to do the practice activities properly, okay? So just take a deep breath, don't rush, take your time with the presentation. Now, that's not to say that it needs to go on for half the lesson, like absolutely not. But take your time to go through the key points that students need to know. Okay, don't just fly through it in order to get it over with. I always find that if I do that, students will come back to me with like a million questions in the practice tasks, and I will end up going back and explaining everything again. Okay, so just do it properly the first time. Don't rush. Go through it nice and properly. Okay, so once you've explained then the meaning, form, and phonology of your tense or your target language, whatever that may be, it is then time to practice. Okay, so there can be two types of practice tasks when it comes to teaching grammar. There can be controlled practice and freer practice. So after we've explained our meaning, form, and phonology, we do a controlled practice. Okay, the purpose of this is to test accuracy. So I'm sure if you think back to when you were at school learning another language, remember you would have to complete lots of sentences or maybe match halves of sentences, or you would have to do a multiple choice and choose the correct sentence. Yeah, these are all controlled practice. The idea is that there is only one correct answer when it comes to controlled practice. Okay, so you are making your students focus on the correct use of the target language. Okay, a gap fill would be by far the most common type of controlled practice. Okay, where they look at a sentence, it has blanks where the verbs should be, and they need to figure out what tense the verb should be. Okay, so it's really important that you do a controlled practice, okay, because this is your chance to make your students prove that they understand how to use the target language. Okay, once you've done your controlled practice and you've corrected it and everything is fine, then you will move on to freer practice. So the freer practice gives the students the chance to use the target language in a suitable fluency-based speaking task. Okay, so whereas controlled practice is all about worksheets and filling in blanks in sentences, the freer practice is where they get to speak. Okay, for example, if you have taught the future simple, your freer practice might be, imagine you and your friend are planning your next holiday together. Okay, you don't know where to go yet. You don't know what you'll do. Okay, so have a conversation and make some plans. Okay, think about destination, think about activities, think about budget. Yeah, think about travel arrangements. Yeah, so you can see that a task like that will naturally make the students use the future simple. Okay. The thing is, though, with freer practice, we don't want to oblige our students to use the target language. We just want them to provide a context, or we just want to provide them with a context in which they will use it naturally. You know, in a freer practice, it doesn't matter if they also use other tenses, you know, that's not an issue, because in real life, we tend to use a ton of different tenses at once. But the idea is that the task provides a natural context for the target language. So in the case of our future simple, that would be planning your next holiday, okay, or making plans for next weekend, etc. But at the same time, while tenses are a lot of what we do when we're teaching grammar, tenses are by no means the only thing. Okay, tenses are, you know, they're a substantial part of grammar, but there is loads of other stuff. So other aspects of grammar you may end up teaching, or you will end up teaching, are syntax, also known as word order. For example, we would never say something like, I drive a car red. okay? Or I have hair blonde, okay? We just don't do that, right? Because that's not the order of things. We always use adjective noun, okay? Blonde hair, red car, okay? Not noun adjective. You know, that may seem super obvious to us as very proficient speakers, but for our students, they will not necessarily know this. Yeah, maybe in their language, they do say things like car red and hair blonde. Okay, so things like teaching word order or syntax is very, very important, especially with the lower levels. You may find yourself teaching countable, uncountable nouns, for example. So a countable noun is something that we can put a number with. For example, 5 cars. Oh, I don't know why I'm obsessed with cars today, guys. It's the example that's coming to my head. We would say 5 cars. Yeah. But we couldn't say, for example, 5 rice. Okay. That wouldn't work because rice is uncountable. We can't say it with a number. Okay. You may find yourself teaching modal verbs. Modal verbs are things like I can, I could, I might. Yeah, I would, I should. Yeah, they're those types of verbs that convey different degrees. Yeah, of what we want to do, what we're obliged to do, etc. What we're able to do. Conditionals is another big branch of grammar. They are all of the if words, like if it snows, I am cold. Yeah, or if it rains, I will stay inside. Yeah, or if it was windy, I would close the window. Okay, if it had snowed, yeah, I would have built a snowman. Okay, they are what we call conditionals, all the different forms with if. And yeah, so many more grammar points. Okay, as I said at the beginning, grammar is infinite. And, you know, there's no need to be afraid of it, even though, you know, it can be slightly daunting at first. So I will leave you with some tips on how to avoid getting overwhelmed by the sheer amount of grammar that's out there. Firstly, take it one point at a time. You don't need to know everything. You just need to know the thing you're going to teach. Accept that you will learn it as you teach. Okay, I know that can be a scary thought, but no, surrender yourself to the process. Okay, you will learn it as you teach it. Take notes. Yeah, like when you research your meaning, form, and phonology, write it all down. Maybe write it down multiple times. Writing it will help cement it in your brain. Try to learn and use the correct terminology. Okay, so try to familiarize yourself with terms like subject, infinitive, yeah, noun, adjective, adverb, etc. Above all, just play the long game when it comes to grammar. Okay, there is no quick fix. Okay, you've got to just put in the work. And once you have taught everything a couple of times, or once you've taught the main points a few times, honestly, I promise it will become so much easier. All right, so that is what I have to share with you about teaching grammar. Now it is your turn. Okay, I want you to hit the chat box and type in any questions that you may have, either about grammar or about teaching grammar. And I will do my very, very best to help. In the meantime, I'm going to see where you all are today. I already see some familiar names, which is lovely. Okay, hello Valentina and Joe and Elena. Lovely to meet you all. Manda in St. Lucia. Oh, wowzers. I don't think I've ever had a student from St. Lucia, Manda. So welcome. I'm very, very happy to see you here. We have South Africa, UK. Hello, Tim in Bristol, just across the water. So Asha, first question. Hello, Asha. I recognize your name. What's the difference between phonology and pronunciation? Asha, no real difference. Okay. As we said, some things have different terms, for the same thing. So this is a good example. So phonology, pronunciation, same difference. Okay. Thank you, Asha. Good question. Okay. We have South Africa, India, England, Canada. Oh, how wonderful. Gary in Alaska. Oh, Gary, I have wanted to visit Alaska my whole life. It just looks amazing. I'm just obsessed with the thought of going to Alaska. Okay. So Lennon, accept that you will learn as you teach. Yeah, honestly, Lennon, it's the truth. It can be hard for, the control freaks among us. I know I am one, or I was one until I started teaching. But yeah, just let it go. It will come. Okay. So hello, Yoga. What grammar guides would you recommend? There are so many of them, Yoga. For me, there are 2 books that I really, really like. I'm going to type them in the chat box. So the first one is English Grammar in Use. And this is by a wonderful writer called Raymond Murphy. Okay. I'm a big fan of this book, especially for new teachers, because it really breaks things down nice and simply. And it also has the bonus of including loads of practice activities that you can then use with your students. So I'm a big fan of English Grammar in Use. Another book that I absolutely love, that is well worth investing in if you're going to make teaching English your lifelong career. It's called Grammar for English Language Teachers. I'm just popping it in the chat box. Oops, I put on my caps lock. Let's go back. So Grammar for English Language Teachers. And this is by a wonderful author called Martin Parrott. Okay. So I would definitely advise that if you do want to make teaching English your permanent gig, do try to invest in a good grammar reference. Okay, because it will last a lifetime. All right, thank you. So Manda, what is the meaning of MFP? So as we said before, Manda, meaning, form, and phonology. Or, Asha has just reminded me, meaning, form, or pronunciation. Okay. You'll read a ton of that in the online course when you get to the teaching grammar unit. Okay, Gary, what do you first teach in grammar? Oh, well, Gary, it totally depends on the level you are teaching. Okay, so if you start teaching beginners, for example, then you will start by teaching the present simple. Yeah, like I go, I have, I see, I eat. Yeah. However, if your first experience is teaching intermediate students, yeah, like B1 students, you might go in with something a little more challenging, like past continuous. Yeah. So, there is no first thing that you always teach. It just depends on the level of the students that you're teaching, okay, and the point that they are at. All right. Kerry, this is the most overwhelming aspect, yeah, for sure, of teaching as a new teacher. Thank you for making it less scary. Good. I am more than happy to help, Kerry. I hope I have reassured you all somewhat. I do remember, though, when I started teaching, like, 20 years ago-ish. Yeah, 20. I know. It used to terrify me, but honestly, the thought of it is worse than the actual reality of it, I promise. Okay. So Lennon, can you please explain further the state of a tense when it is perfect and simple? Good question. So normally, Lennon, when we say a tense is simple, it just means that it's, in form, in structure, it's very short. Like it's just one verb. Okay. For example, I go, I went, I will go. Okay. They're simple. the meaning of simple, it can vary a little bit depending on the tense that we are teaching. But for example, present simple, I go, I have. Yeah. The main meaning tends to be for daily routine, or not even daily, just routine. Like I go to the gym every week. Okay. Or I visit Spain every summer. Okay. So, simple, present simple tends to imply some sort of regularity, some sort of routine. However, when we say perfect, Lennon, the idea of perfect is that it links 2 points in time. For example, I have been to 10 countries. Yeah, that links the past. So what we're really saying is from the moment I was born in the past until now in my life, I have visited 10 countries. Okay, so we're linking the past and the present. Okay, or if we're saying by next May, I will have finished my course. Yeah, by next May, I will have finished my course. We're linking now and next May. And we're saying all of the time between now and next May in the future, I will have finished my course. So yeah, there we go. Simple tends to be about routine. Well, present simple tends to be about routine. And anything perfect is like linking 2 points in time. Perfects can be tricky. Okay, I'm not going to lie. Perfect can be challenging, both for teachers and students. But yeah, just think of it as a bridge between 2 points in time. All right. So, hello, Elena. What types of error correction are preferable when teaching complex grammar? Oh gosh, Elena, any errors related to meaning, form, or phonology are always worth picking up. Okay, keep that MFP. So, for example, if students are using the target language in the wrong context, like if they say something like, I will go to the park yesterday, that's a clear meaning error, right? So you need to jump right in there and correct them. If they are saying things like, I will going to the park, that's a form thing. You've got to correct it. Okay, you've got to make sure they're using the right structure. If they're saying things like, I will have, I will have, you have to correct that because nobody will understand them if they say will instead of will. Okay. So yeah, you've just got to jump in there, Elena. Correct any errors with meaning, form, and pronunciation or phonology. I find, Elena, that in the controlled practice stage, it's best to just get in there and correct them straight away. Okay. With freer practice, when they're speaking more fluently, I would probably just, when I heard an error, I would probably just write it down. And then when the task was over, I would then do like a delayed error correction. Because in freer practice, we don't want to be interrupting them. Okay, we want to let them go. But yeah, anything related to MFP, get in there. Okay, thank you. So Ziva, what a beautiful name. How to deal with repeated tense mistakes. Well, Ziva, I guess as you're teaching each tense, like as you're presenting each tense, really make sure that your CCQs or your concept checking questions are on point. Okay, make sure that you really hammer home the meaning, form, and phonology, and make sure that you allow them to do their controlled practice. Yeah, make sure they do sufficient controlled to give them time to work it out in their own minds, and then give them a natural context in the freer practice. If, say, for example, you're doing a speaking task and you recognize that like all of the tenses are wrong, it might be worth just going back to basics and spending time on each individual tense, okay, over the course of a couple of weeks. Okay. If, for example, though, the student is just talking too quickly and they've just too many ideas and they're just not giving themselves time to think, Just make them correct themselves, okay? Like, let them say what they want to say, write down the mistakes that they're making, and then say, okay, let's go back and think about what you said, okay? What would be the correct tense to use here? What would be the correct tense to use in this context? Just make them stop and think about it. Because sometimes, they get so used to making mistakes, they just make it without even thinking. So yeah, just draw their attention to it. Yeah, without beating them over the head with it, but draw their attention to it, make them think about it. And hopefully that way we can fix those ingrained errors. Okay. So Valentina, let's see. So when I'm teaching my little students in primary school, I start to make difference to auxiliary verbs. So do for simple tense, be for progressive, have for perfect tense, past and present tense. Is it, in your opinion, a good way? Sure, Valentina, why not? I mean, I think with kids, though, I would focus first on just getting them to use the language. Yeah, I'd get them singing their songs and making short sentences. I'd focus on them using it rather than analyzing the grammar, if you understand. Like, I wouldn't analyze the grammar first and then let them use it. Okay, I would do the opposite. I'd make them use it because, kids are amazing at that. If you play them a song that is all full of present simple, they will learn the words and they will sing along. They mightn't necessarily know why they're doing it. Yeah, but I'd get them to use it first and be familiar with it first, and then start looking at the auxiliary verbs, like, oh, what did we use in this song? And oh, what did we hear in that story? So, that's the way I would approach teaching it. But yeah, there's absolutely no problem with addressing auxiliary verbs. That's really important. So yeah, sounds like you are absolutely along the right lines. All right, thank you, Valentina. Okay, Gary, is there an assessment test to find out where your students are? Yeah, absolutely. So this is what we would call a level test or a placement test. Okay, so level tests, Gary, tend to be like multiple choice, usually like a multiple choice quiz of maybe 20 or 30 questions, and they'll start off really easy and they'll get progressively harder. And the idea is that as many questions as your students get right will correspond to a certain level. So I would recommend getting on Google and finding a level test that you like and that you think would work well. Also, very important, get the key. Like, for example, 1 to 10 questions correct means beginner, yeah, or 10 to 15 questions correct means elementary. But yeah, level tests. If you Google them, you'll find a ton. If you work for a language school, they will do all of that for you. Okay, so thank you, Gary. So Donatella, rainy Italy. Oh yeah, I hear you. I'm in rainy Ireland. I bet Ireland is a lot rainier on average. So welcome. So hello Lang, I'm from Vietnam. Welcome. I'm wondering how to make students enjoy doing language exercises. Practice makes perfect, but it can be tedious for students. Oh, absolutely, Lang. I agree. Tons and tons of gap fills. Yeah, it can get really old really quickly. So there are a couple of things you can do, Lang. You can turn them into interactive quizzes. For example, if you've heard of Kahoot, it's like a really fun thing. You can make a quiz and the students all get a code, an entry code, and they can kind of play on their devices, or if you're teaching online, they can play from home, but you will see their answers in real time. So Kahoot is really fun. Another thing that I like to do, Lang, is every so often make my own language exercises. So I will write my own gap fills, but I will use the names of the students in the class, and I'll make sentences about stuff they like, yeah, or things that I know about them. That can make a gap fill a lot of fun for your students when they see their names in the sentences and when it's stuff that they relate to. Another thing you can do is make it into a competitive thing. Like you can make it into like a table quiz type thing, put them in teams, let them confer on their answers. Another thing you can do is allow them to write their own quizzes for each other. Yeah. Another thing you can do, if you're teaching, for example, younger kids, or adults, I've done it with every age group, you can write like individual sentences, like gap fill sentences on a big piece of paper and stick them around the room. Okay. And then everybody just stands up, they take a pen and paper with them, and you put them into maybe groups of 2 or 3, and they all just walk around, walking from paper to paper, discussing their answer, writing it down. Really, in all of these things, they are still doing the language exercise, but it's just dressed up a little differently to give it some variety. Okay. So hopefully they are some good ideas for you. I know I gave you a ton of ideas there very quickly, but everybody remember that in a few days, this webinar will be posted on our YouTube channel along with all of the rest of them, and you can always go back and watch. Okay, so if you've missed anything I've said today, you can go back and watch it. Okay, today is Saturday, right? So by Tuesday, it should be on YouTube, along with all of the other webinars on our YouTube channel. All right. So, hello, Academy of Financial Markets. Do you teach the conditionals in separate lessons? Yeah, typically, I think it would be far too overwhelming to go in teaching all 4. Yeah, as we said, normally we will just teach, one thing at a time when it comes to grammar. So, yeah, for example, on the level 5 course, assignment B is all about teaching the first conditional. So you would just be teaching the first conditional, okay? Nothing else. All right, so hopefully that is reassuring for you. Okay. All right, let's see. So, hello, Eric. Have you heard of Essentials of English Grammar by Elsie Bow? No, I haven't, Eric, but I'm going to. I'm sorry, no, I've never heard of that one. But anything with essentials, it's got to be good, right? I'm sorry, though, I don't know. I'm not familiar. I will look it up, though. All right. Lennon, I see you have a question, but it's not really on our topic today. So why don't you send a ticket to tutor support, and we will be happy to tell you. Okay. All right. So, do we have any other questions? I'm just going to run back through the comments to make sure I haven't missed anything, because sometimes I'm going so quickly, I skip things. Okay. I think I have everything. But we still have a couple of minutes left, so, type in those questions. I do love talking about grammar. Okay. No more questions for the moment. So while you're thinking of some other grammar-related questions, let me just recap on the main things we've talked about in this webinar. Okay, as you know, when you're lesson planning, it's always nice to end with a recap, right? So, first of all, we talked about the term target language, okay, which is what we call the grammar point that we are teaching in the class. Okay, we then spoke about the importance of MFP, okay, meaning, form, and phonology. Meaning was why we use that grammar point. Yeah. Form was the structure, and that's where we use all the terminology like subject, yeah, infinitive, etc. And then we talked about phonology, which was letting our students hear what the grammar point sounds like in a natural sentence. Okay, not forgetting to address contractions. We also spoke about the importance of eliciting. So give your students the chance to tell you before you tell them. Remember, we did the example with the future simple, like next weekend, I to the park. Yeah. So it's super, super important that you try to elicit. If students don't know, tell them and move on. And you can also elicit the form and the pronunciation. We also discussed the importance of CCQs, or concept checking questions. We saw that there are then two types of practice: the controlled practice, in which there is only one correct answer, for example, gap fills, and then we will do a freer practice where we give students the chance to speak and to use the target language in a natural context as they see fit. Okay, and then I reassured you that there is no need to panic. Okay, you will learn it by teaching it, and I emphasized the importance of doing your research. Okay, so hopefully that will echo in your mind when it comes to teaching grammar or doing a grammar assignment or a grammar lesson plan. Okay, so let's see. I think we have more questions. So Manda, there are no credits. Yeah, the webinars are just voluntary. Okay, so you won't get any credit for them, but they hopefully will help you a lot with the assignments. Okay, Valentina, how can I read number plus plural nouns? I'm not sure I understand this question, Valentina. Are you referring to countable and uncountable nouns? I wonder. So plural nouns would always be countable, right? Because the plural will imply that there are more than one of them. Okay. So yeah, hopefully that was your question, but if it wasn't your question, please type in another message to clarify, and I'll do my best to answer. Okay, Ziva, do you think that grammar is innate, universal grammar theory? Ziva, I do not. I do not agree with Noam Chomsky on this. Unfortunately, I know he is a lot smarter than any of us, but no, I do not believe that grammar is innate. I believe it's something that needs to be noticed. It's something that you need a lot of exposure to. Okay, and it's something that needs to be worked on. Okay, I don't believe it's in there, just waiting to be unleashed, I'm afraid. Especially not in EFL. All right, but yeah, very interesting questions, Eva. Thank you. Richard, hi, just wondering if you teach contractions and negatives along with a particular verb form, or would you space that out over several lessons? No, Richard, I would teach it as it comes. So if, for example, you are teaching the future simple tense, like I will go, you know, when we're doing the form for that, we would also cover the question and the negative. Okay, so, you know, you're not just teaching the affirmative. You're probably starting with the affirmative, but then you would also elicit the form of the negative and the form of the question form. Okay, so it'd all go together. I don't think there's any need to space it out. Okay, because, you know, they need to know negatives and questions. We don't always just talk in affirmative all the time, unfortunately. All right. So Valentina, 5 cars. It says 5's cars. So do you mean numbers, writing as a number and writing as a word? Possibly. So normally I would just use the number, I think. Okay, and when writing, I would tend to use the word. Okay, so yeah, thank you, Valentina. I'm still not sure I've understood your question, I'm afraid, but hopefully it helped. And Fatima, last question. It's 1 hour. Timelines are interesting. Is there any resources which provides all the tenses in timelines? I'm not sure, Fatima. I can't see that I've ever seen one, but that's not to say it's not out there. Okay, so hit up Google. I would advise searching for timeline plus the name of the tense that you would like. For example, timeline present simple, yeah, or present continuous timeline, or past perfect timeline. Okay, but I'm sorry, off the top of my head, I don't know a place that has them all together. All right. So everyone, our time is up. Oh, that has gone so quickly. I knew it would. It always does. Yeah, grammar is always a fun time. Time flies. So thank you all for sticking with me. And if there are some questions I haven't got to, please send it along to tutor support. Okay, open a ticket. We are there all day, every day, waiting to help. So yeah, pop in your ticket to tutor support and we will do our best. I have a quick favor to ask before we all head off about our Saturdays. We are always looking to get feedback from you about these webinars. Yeah, we're always trying to make them as good as they can be for you all, or maybe get some suggestions for future webinars that you would like. So if you could hop along to this website and take 1 more minute to complete our survey, we would truly appreciate it. I'm going to write it in the chat box. I'm going to write the link in the chat box so that you can get to it more easily. All right, there we go. And just another reminder that all of our past webinars are all on our YouTube channel. Okay, so hop along to YouTube, search for the TEFL Academy, and you will find them all there. And this one will be uploaded in the next couple of days. All right, so thank you so much for coming along. I hope it's been of use to you, and I hope that I will see you all again next week. Okay, same time, same place. All right, everyone. Bye-bye.